Bonjour, bienvenue. Welcome to Saint de Luz on the French Atlantic coast, off the Bay of Biscay. Bonjour les amis, bienvenue. This is Vero. Bit of an impromptu walk. Hello everyone, hello. I'm going to wait a few minutes to start talking, giving people time to arrive. Bonjour, I hope you're having a good Saturday. I know some of you just woke up. It's 5 p.m. here in France, and I am standing on a beautiful boardwalk. That's not really wood, but I'll call it a boardwalk in Saint de Luz, one of the popular seaside resorts south of Biarritz, very close to Spain, so close to Spain. And as you can see, this is pretty much a beach scene. Bonjour Lachlan, bonjour les amis. There are a lot of people here. So I can tell they're somewhat trying to social distance. Masks are mandatory in the town, so you will see people wearing face masks as I am right now, but they are not on the beach. The beaches are closed at night, though. They don't want people to gather on the beach at night anymore, so that's one different rule right now. See the beautiful sailboat out there? The breeze is quite nice, I must say. It's not too hot here. After being in Bordeaux for 10 days during that heat wave we just had, I'm really enjoying Biarritz and today Saint de Luz. It's very nice. It was overcast when I arrived midday, and now the sun's shining, so everybody's out at the beach, or a lot of people are. Bonjour, bonjour, bienvenue, I see you. Now, you may know that August 15th is the busiest, one of the busiest weekends of the year in France, and certainly the busiest weekend in the summer. It's a holiday weekend. It originally celebrates the Assumption. It's a Catholic holiday at the beginning, at the start, but now it's also a big holiday weekend. A lot of French people here visiting from the southwest or southwestern France, or just from many other regions of France. I like looking at license plates on cars, and I see Parisians, I see people from Lyon, I see people from all over the place. So today I'd like to take you on a stroll around Saint de Luz for a little while. I know a lot of you would like to be traveling right now, but you can't, and I thought this would be a really nice walk for you to see and to join, however virtually or vicariously I should say. Saint de Luz is a small city, and it's really a story of reliance, of not reliance, what's the word I'm looking for, of you know, this city has fought the sea throughout its history. Resilience is the word I'm looking for, I guess. And what you see in the background are 3 seawalls. I cannot zoom in with Facebook here, but you have a seawall on the left there. You have one directly across from me, and you have one on the right-hand side. So the story of Saint de Luz is that this poor city has been beaten up by the sea pretty much throughout its history. And it was so bad that part of the city was destroyed. In fact, this beach was part of the city, and it's now gone. The city sits behind me, and we will see more of it later. So this is the back here of Saint de Luz, the city's here. But the sea, you know, was able to take down a lot of houses that sat here. And so it took the work of one French leader, to actually make it work. Kings throughout the 17th, 18th century tried to build walls to protect this bay, the Bay of Saint de Luz, Cibourg. Cibourg is another town linked to this one, right next to here. And every time a king built a wall, Even Louis XIV, the Sun King who came here, we'll talk about that later. Every time they built a wall, the sea, the wind, the rain took it down. So it took one man. Since you've been with me in Biarritz, you've heard me talk about Napoleon III and the Second Empire in France in the second half of the 19th century. And you already know that Napoleon and his wife, Eugenia, loved staying in Biarritz every summer. And when he came here in the mid-19th century, bonjour Roz, when he came here in the mid-19th century, Napoleon III realized that this was a problem. This town really needed help. And he is the one who actually found the money to build those seawalls that you see in the distance. The one on the left took 15 years to build, so he saw it in his lifetime. The one in the middle took 30 years to build, and the one on the right, I think, took over a decade as well. So by the very end of the 19th century, this bay was completely protected, and you can bet that they check on those seawalls regularly and that they have been worked on regularly. But today this is considered one of the safest bays on the Atlantic coast, and the beach is beautiful. You have a large beach here. It's considered very safe and clean, and a lot of families come here in the summer. There are other beaches, but this is really the largest one. And I love these little tents, colorful little tents. They have those in Biarritz, but this is a very different atmosphere from Biarritz. Biarritz feels like a big city, and this is where, of course, Napoleon III focused in terms of the architecture, turning it from a fishing village into the big resort that it is today. And he did spend some time helping the people here, and thanks to him, Saint de Luz was able to survive. Just to give you an idea, this was a thriving little port city in the 17th century with about 12,000 people. I'll talk about that in a minute. By the French Revolution, there were 3,000 people left in town. Everybody had left. They just thought they couldn't win against the sea. And then he came along in the 19th century and saved it. I see all your bonjours and hellos, and I'm not trying to ignore you, so welcome. We are in Saint de Luz on the beautiful Atlantic coast, and we are taking a stroll today around this lovely town. You can see the beach is very busy. So I wanted you to understand the ties, the struggle really that it's been for this town to survive the sea, and at the same time, the city has always depended on the sea. In the 17th century, they thrived. Their fishermen sent ships all the way out to Newfoundland to fish and to hunt whales. At some point in time, the king protected those ships when there were wars in Europe, especially wars with Spain, and they developed a really big group of privateers here. So privateers were not like pirates, they're official pirates. They basically capture foreign ships and confiscate their cargo on behalf of the king, and that of course helped the city tremendously, and some people became extremely wealthy in the city. So this city has always benefited from the sea. At the same time, the city almost disappeared because of it. So that, I think, makes Saint de Luz very, very interesting. So I will start walking now and show you what I like in this city, especially along the water. You can see there are pretty big crowds here. The architecture is really interesting. If I look around, look at the house on the right and the contrast with the one on the left. The one on the left is clearly late 19th, early 20th century with its little ceramic accents and that tower. The one on the right is more typical of what you see around here. I know face masks are a big interest to everyone right now, so just to be clear, one more time, face masks are mandatory in the town itself, and you will see everybody wearing them as I head downtown in the heart of town. They are mandatory in the place where I'm walking now. They are not mandatory on the beach. And people are pretty good with face masks. As I walked around the city, I hardly saw anyone without one. Paris is changing the rules as of today. So they're expanding the number of neighborhoods where people will have to wear face masks. keeping things complicated instead of making it a rule across the board, but I guess they'll get to that. So let's look at these houses. When you talk about protection from the sea, we talked about the seawalls over there, out there protecting this bay. There are other seawalls closer to the city, and look at how the city is built. Look at how it's raised right here. You see where I'm walking? The street is down below. And here's the beach. So a lot of these houses have those little bridges, which I think is so unique. They have those bridges connecting them to the walkway so they can go to the beach. Hey Drew, bonjour. So I'm going to show you some of these houses and then we'll go inside the streets and we will talk, I'll tell you a little bit more about important guests this town once entertained, other than Napoleon III I mentioned at the beginning. If you've missed the introduction, my name is Vero. I am a Paris-based tour guide, and this summer I am traveling around France and particularly Western France, sharing my travels with the France with Vero community daily on Facebook and Instagram, as well as YouTube, where I share a lot of video guided walks and some live stream walks like this one. Look at this house. Do you see the gentleman on the left? He's wearing a beret. The beret Basque is one of the things people look for here. They were really invented in a nearby province known as the Béarn, B-E-A-R-N, but a lot of people refer to the Basque beret as well. Most houses have names, like first names, and often female names, because in France a house is feminine, it's female, right? We say une maison. So a lot of the names will be women's names or female names. Oh, goody, fewer crowds here. So life is a beach today in Saint de Luz, definitely. People are having fun, trying to forget what's going on around France and around the world right now. As always, it's pretty hard for me to read comments because the sun is just, those screens, those cell phone screens are not that big. I'm doing my best. If I see questions as I go, I'll answer them if I can. If not, I'll answer them later because they'll pop up in the comment section. So more of these houses are here. As you can see, they've learned from the past and everything is done to protect the city and the houses from the sea, from the ocean. In spite of the seawalls, they're not taking any chances. You're welcome. I'm glad you could join us. Escapism is what it's all about. Learning as well. I'm not a local expert, obviously. I got here today, but I like to do my research before I visit a destination and find my bearings before I share information with you. So I'll keep walking a little bit farther up and then I will go down some stairs and go back in the city. But I wanted you to experience those houses that are quite unique to this area. I rode a bus from Biarritz to get here, number 3, which is a regional bus, very comfortable. They have Wi-Fi on board, and it was just a couple of euros. It was very cheap, and it took about, I think it took about 30 minutes. We made a few stops on the way, and the views were quite nice. You could see a lot of these houses in the countryside, the whitewashed walls, and then the red trims, which we'll talk about in a minute. Back to the beach. It's nice to paddle boarding, seems to be popular. It's gaining speed in France, I've noticed it. In the distance is a fort that you cannot visit, right next to the first seawall. And look at the sailboats having a fabulous time. It's really windy out there. The water seems good, a lot of people are swimming. Beach vibes. I haven't seen surfers like in Biarritz because I guess the surf is not quite the same. The bay is really protected. Huh? Where is that house I wanted to show you? Oh, it's coming up. Good. I just love how these houses are connected to the waterfront. Just kind of hanging there. Rain is in the forecast tonight for a few hours. I hope I make it back to Biarritz in time. Since I'm wearing sandals. Oh, this house is named Villa Sevigne, like the Marquise de Sevigne, who's very famous in the 17th century, mostly for the letters she wrote to her daughter that describe life in 17th century Paris and France. Now look at this house, because when we walk in the old town, we will be seeing the other side of the house. And here's my favorite. I thought some of you might want to look at it, because it's a place you can rent. You can rent apartments right here in this house, which obviously has been here for quite a while. I would say it's in need of a little bit of TLC maybe. But it's still coquette, as we say in French, C-O-Q-U-E-T-T-E. Quite lovely, you see, with the little flowers. So it's called the Villa Paulette. Paulette is the first name. You access it here. Bienvenue à la Villa Paulette. And la Villa Paulette is actually a rental property. The sign tells us that you can rent apartments here year-round. Phone number 0682 29 0888. I'm sure they have a website. So there you go. You could come here, rent one of these apartments, hop across your little bridge, and be on this beautiful bay. Pas mal, as we say in French. Not bad at all. It actually means very good. We just like to play blasé, to act blasé. You see boats coming back to the harbor. The harbor starts at the river, local river called La Nivelle, N-I-V-E-L-L-E. And there's a pretty big harbor. We'll take a peek at it. So now what I'm going to do is go back down so you can see the town. Cell coverage seems pretty good here, so far so good. Let me know if it's not, but there's nothing much I can do about it. I checked earlier to make sure the picture quality would be good. All right, so one last look at the beach before we leave. You can see there's another beach by the fort over there, all the way to the end. So there's several really along the bay. This is the largest one. Here is the beautiful Bay of Saint de Luz, Saint de Luz, Cibourg, the two towns that are connected by that river. I really like the waterfront. The architectural style is much more homogeneous than it is in Biarritz. I think it's really pretty. I hear there are some great walks you can take on either side of the bay, over there and on the left, but I did not have time for that today. Next time, la prochaine fois. There's always a next time. All right, and now is the trick. Let's not fall as we go down these guys. And keep it stable. Almost there. Voila, done. In one piece. So the harbor, like I was saying, is quite large. And it's split up in two sections, not unusual in these parts. On the right-hand side, which is right across from us, is Le Port de Plaisance. La Plaisance is just fun boating, right? Plaisance. So this yacht coming in is probably going into that one. And then over there on the left is the fishing harbor. So this is where the fishermen's boat go. They still fish in this area. They don't hunt whales anymore, but they do fish. Tourism is also a big part of the local economy, and from the looks of it, this August they don't have any complaints. A lot of French people are here, more French people than Europeans from what I can tell. I am going to walk along this street called, oh, somebody's not happy. I am going to walk along, you see the sign? It says Rue Mazarin, M-A-Z-A-R-I-N. You may recognize this name. The Cardinal de Mazarin, the Cardinal of Mazarin, was once a very popular man, a man of the church, but a powerful man all the same, who succeeded another powerful man of the church named Cardinal of Richelieu. France and Spain were at war for decades. And at some point in time, it made sense to find a truce and to sign an agreement to put an end to it. And that is what the Cardinal of Mazarin worked on in the 17th century, when a young king ruled France. His name was Louis XIV, the future Sun King. So as you can imagine, they signed that treaty and in the area, and the treaty had many, many provisions, and one of them we will talk about in a minute. But here is the back of that villa I told you about earlier. I pointed out La Villa Sevigne. So I want you to see, these are the houses we saw on the other side, with the bridges connecting them to the walkway. And here they are. Here's the back of them, which I think is really neat to see. Now, a lot of the houses in this area very often face east. Their backs are turned to the sea. And after what I told you at the beginning of this call, you can see why. The sea means opportunity, but it also means danger. So a lot of the main rooms of the house would face this way instead of the ocean. I'm glad you're enjoying this walk. I am enjoying it too. This is a lovely town. So as I was saying a few minutes ago, France and Spain decided to sign a treaty to put an end to their endless wars in the 17th century, and a powerful man named the Cardinal of Mazarin was in charge of negotiating with Spain. One of the provisions of the treaty involved the French king, young French king, Louis XIV, marrying the daughter of the Spanish king. Her name was, bonjour, was Maria Theresa of Austria. She was born in Spain, and they decided she would marry Louis XIV. Now, she could not leave her country if she wasn't married. So first, there was a marriage by proxy. And then, once they were married, she could come here and meet her future husband. So they definitely were the most famous guests this town ever entertained. And they've entertained a few. In the town, you can still see the houses where they stayed and the church where they got married. Louis XIV, the Sun King, was here. We have 130 people logged in. That's wonderful. Thank you for joining me. One of the reasons I like traveling around France is to find some of the historical figures that always get mentioned in Paris and to realize what else they did for the country outside of Paris. I mentioned earlier today what Napoleon III did for this town, pretty much saved it from the ocean. And I'm going to show you a couple of houses that are interesting here. You know, I like architecture and I like old houses. Though I'm not an architect. So these two houses are kind of landmarks in town. You see how different they are? The one on the left is typical of some farms in this area. Farms were built this way or are built this way, but because it's dated probably sometime in the 16th or 17th century, they've done work on it over the years, but because it's fairly old, you can see some of the medieval too in it, like the half-timbered frames. They say the top was probably added in the 20th century, the top floor with the balcony, but everything else was built in the 16th through the 17th century. You can see the corbelled section right here. You can see a date, 1690, which was the last big remodel they did before they added the top floor, and you see that the door was probably added at that time. And those interesting windows, those oval-shaped windows, we call them œil de bœuf, the eye of an ox. I don't know what you call them in English. Maybe the same thing pronounced differently. So this is the first one. The second one is much more, you can tell right away, of a bourgeois home. This one was built to impress, and it shows. So it's probably dated to about the same time, 16th, 17th century, but it was heavily remodeled in the 18th. And you can tell from looking at the facade, the stone on the facade, and you also see the beautiful railings and the very symmetrical windows. So this is clearly 18th century style. And then they added the mansard roof that you see so much in Paris, but instead of having the roof that adds a lot of space to a house, right? Because it elevates the house and adds extra space in what was the attic. And instead of having slate like you would see in Paris, it's actually tile. Now this house is nicknamed the House of the Three Cannons. Can you guess why? Because there are three cannons up there between those windows. Do you see them? I cannot zoom in on Facebook, unfortunately. Now guess what those cannons are? Those cannons are actually the local gargoyles. They are drain spouts. So they are for the rain to fall away from the facade, the House of the Three Cannons. So these are two very interesting types of the local architecture. This red color, this dark red color that you see, is referred to as a Basque red from the Basque Country. I think it's referred to as ox blood. And originally, they used ox blood, the blood of an ox, as a very popular dye. So a lot of the houses I saw on the way today in the countryside were white. They didn't all have, I mean, they weren't half-timbered homes like this one necessarily, but they had the white facade, whitewashed facade, and then they had this color on their shutters and doors, a little bit like that one over there. You see a lot of that. Now back to the story of the most famous wedding this town ever knew. Louis XIV and l'Infante, i.e. the king's daughter, l'Infante of Spain, Maria Theresa of Austria. I know the name is confusing. So the newlyweds, well, they weren't newlyweds. If they had been wed, I said, by proxy, they arrived separately in the town. So the young lady, she was about 20, 22, arrived and stayed in this house that belonged to a wealthy merchant. In fact, this house has a very cute plaque on it. If I manage to read it. It says, L'Infante je reçus en l'an 1660. L'Infante, i.e. the king's daughter of Spain, I welcomed in the year 1660. And then it says, on m'appelle depuis le château de l'Infante. Ever since that day, I have been named the Château of the Infante. So I think that's rather cute. So this is the side entrance. We haven't seen anything yet. It's actually quite a magnificent home. So picture the young Spanish princess arriving here, meeting her future mother-in-law, Anne of Austria, who was the wife of Louis XIII and the mother of Louis XIV. She met her here and they got along very well. Look at this. This is in a tribute to Louis le Grand, Louis the Great, i.e., of course, Louis XIV. Now let's look at the front of the house. And the front of the house overlooks the Fisherman's Harbor. And it was one of the most beautiful houses in town. That's why she stayed here. So if you look around, too bad the sun's facing us. What I'll do is I'll walk and turn around from that side so you can see it a little better. How about that? Bonjour if you've just joined us. This is Véronique, Véro, continuing her travels in Western France. We are in the Basque Country, in the lovely town of Saint de Luz. I am staying in Biarritz for a few days and this is a bit of my day trip outside Biarritz. Rode a bus here, just having a fabulous time, sharing my travels every day in social media, as you know, Facebook, Instagram, and of course all the videos on YouTube under France with Vero. So look me up, the harbor, and now we should be able to see the house. Look at the beautiful house where this young woman, the daughter of the King of Spain, stayed with her mother-in-law in May of 1660, May-June 1660, until she married the King of France, Louis XIV. Pas mal. Now the town is just in front of us, and I am going to take you now to a square named after Louis XIV. We will not be able to go all the way to that church. I did visit it and took photos earlier. Do you see the church in the distance? This is the church where they actually got married. And they could walk from her house, the one we just saw, and his house, which is over there. I will show it to you. So they got married in June of 1660. And after a few days, they headed to Paris and made a triumphal entrance in Paris, where big celebrations awaited them, the newlyweds. She bore him several children, but sadly, most of them never reached adulthood. One of their grandsons became King of Spain, so that was something to rejoice about for Louis XIV. Oh, I like these signs. So this is, and it says, Ici commence l'océan, ne rien jeter. The ocean starts here. Please don't throw any trash in the drain. I've seen that in other towns. That's nice. Yes, I will share the church pictures with my club members in the next couple of days. If you want to access extra content, extra photos, stories, and videos and live events, consider joining my my club. It's called France with Vero Club on Patreon. The information is in the video notes. I will add that later. It's very affordable and you can unlock a lot of rewards and get to see more fun stuff if you are a club member. So I hope you consider it. It also helps me. This is my job now. This is what I do, reporting on my travels, sharing what I see around Paris and France. And thanks to my patrons, a big shout out to them, I am able to do walks like this one that you are all enjoying today. So thank you in advance for your support. Really appreciate that. So here we are on this, you would think it's a pretty typical square, little place or square, you know, that you would see in a French town, even with a gazebo in the middle. And you see all these cafes, terraces. Yeah, the masks should be no surprise. I've mentioned on a couple of occasions since the beginning of this walk that they are mandatory in town unless you're sitting down at a cafe terrace. So everybody you see walking around should be wearing one right now. And people are pretty compliant from what I've seen here in Biarritz. So this is a pretty typical square. People enjoying life outside. But we haven't seen the house where the king stayed, have we? We saw the house where Maria Teresa of Austria, his wife, the young Spanish princess, stayed a few minutes ago. Of course, they gave the best house to the king. And his house was this one. Again, it belonged to a wealthy local merchant. It's very hard to see from the streets because of the trees. I will do my best to show it to you. Thank you, patrons, for putting a word in on behalf of our club. That's very nice. I appreciate that. I don't think many Francophiles who have joined have been disappointed so far based on the feedback they send me. And I work really hard at delivering extra content for them, extra stories, extra videos. We just had a lovely chat, our monthly chat yesterday on Zoom, talked about travel. I shared a list of my favorite French artists and suggested a playlist. Here is the house where Louis XIV stayed when he came into town. You know what's really cool about this house? It's actually been owned by the same family since the 17th century, and they still occupy the top floor. There's even a hidden kitchen you cannot see when you visit. And I visited earlier, and it was so interesting because the decor on the floors that you can visit is definitely what Louis XIV would have seen, especially the room. You see the bed where he slept. But there are pictures of the different generations of the family since they still live in the house. You have on the furniture, you also have photos of kids and grandkids, some of them dating to the 1920s, some of them dating to the 1950s, some of them taken recently. So this old house that's been here for so long actually still lives. There are people in this house who, they're not here year-round, but they come and they visit. They have bedrooms upstairs and a hidden kitchen and bathrooms. And then you have tourists like myself. I came in today and visited the house. How often can you do that? That's really neat. So you can see it's called La Maison Louis XIV, the house of Louis XIV. And everything here reminds you of the king. Now this house on that side I'm looking at used to overlook the harbor and have a beautiful view on the harbor. But one of the women living in the house, okay, here's a little bit of trivia. I think you'll enjoy this story. One of the women living in the house once was a widow. And in the 17th century, when they built the first city hall, the young widow was not interested in marrying the gentleman who was more or less the mayor. So he decided to build the city hall. This is part of the city hall, right next to the house where Louis XIV stayed, which means the view they had from those windows on the side, do you see those windows? They've been closed off because he blocked off the view. Isn't that lovely? And he built the city hall right here. So this is what we call in French the Hôtel de Ville. Hôtel de Ville, which can also mean a city hall. Thanks, Mary. Thanks for the glowing feedback. Here is the entrance to the Hôtel de Ville, the city hall. And you can see there is a statue here honoring the Sun King, clearly the most famous guest this town ever knew. Let's see. Here he is. Bonjour, Louis. So, I think I'm going to wrap up this walk. I know you would like to keep going, but I have to catch my bus back to Biarritz. There is some rain in the forecast. I'd like to avoid that if I can. You know what I'll do? I'll walk up the steps of the gazebo and I'll wrap up from under the gazebo. How does that sound? Thank you for joining me today in Saint de Luz to learn about the history, the fascinating history of this beautiful town and how it was barely saved by a French emperor, Napoleon III, who's often criticized because he did not have the military genius of his uncle, Napoleon I. But in terms of urbanism and all the cities he developed and worked on in France, I think he did pretty well. We can't all be military geniuses, can we? Or skilled diplomats. Here we are. You are now standing right under a French gazebo in the heart of a small town named Saint de Luz in the Basque Country along the French Atlantic coast with Véro, your guide, who's always happy to share what she sees with you. I hope you've enjoyed this very impromptu walk. I had given a fair warning to my patrons on the Zoom call yesterday. That's another perk about being a patron, is that you hear of events ahead of time and you can plan for them. You can even influence what we do during those events, because some of the patrons have just updated the program and some of the patrons will be able soon to choose where I walk, especially in Paris. So these are things to consider. Hint, hint. People having a great time. And I'm going to wrap up maybe, I know where, looking at the house where the young princess from Spain married the powerful French king. And they were together for about 20 years, I think. She died at a fairly young age. And then, of course, he went on to have a very long rule over France. Thank you so much. I will say a little goodbye in person. That's me with my mask slipping off. I just want to say goodbye to you. Thank you for joining me today in Saint de Luz. It's been a pleasure, as always. I will go on the bus and read your comments, which I could barely see during the walk. But I hope you've enjoyed it. And I will see you very soon. Share more of my travel adventures in Biarritz, where I am until Monday, and then I'm going on to another city. Au revoir, les amis. It's been fun to see you. À bientôt.